Well, hello my friends, happy Sunday to you. Before we get started, I just wanted to pop in and tell you, kind of explain what I'm doing. There's a lot going to be going on in this piece, I think. That is the plan anyway, but I wanted to share with you just a couple of things. So in this piece, I'm going to be doing an abstract, and I have a theme and a quote and all that kind of stuff. But I wanted to include some gold leaf, and gold leaf is really expensive, and I only had a little bit, and I didn't want to buy a whole nother thing of it for one project. So I thought, what if I created my own, or tried, something similar? Because a lot of times it's going in all the layers and everything anyway. So I thought I would share with you really quick what I did and what I feel like has worked the best. So I have three things here. So this one is the Extreme Sheen. This is Deco Art's Extreme Sheen metallic paint. And I'm really, really pleased with how everything turned out, to be honest with you, with all of my experiments, because I was like, oh, I'll just try a little bit of everything and see which one works the best. So this one is Extreme Sheen, and you can see how it's all crinkly, and I did that on purpose. I just kind of crinkled it up because a lot of times gold leaf kind of has those lines and crinkles in it because of how, how thin it is and that kind of thing. So I'm trying to really replicate that as much as possible as I, because then I'm going to tear this up and put it down as a collage element basically in my piece. And this is just done. I just did this on regular copy paper. I just took the copy paper and then just painted right over it. So this is the Extreme Sheen. Love it. It has a kind of a somewhat of a glittery kind of effect to it. When you get a good coat on that, that kind of goes away. But I'm pretty happy with that, and I'll probably use it. Then this one I think I like the best. In fact, I do like it the best. This is Sargent Art's Liquid Metal, and I just want to tell you that all of these are relatively inexpensive. So a great option for, creating something like gold leaf without the cost. And then you can, use a little bit, save it, and use it as collage element at another time. And what I've done again is I've crinkled this up, and then what I did was I just took some black fluid acrylic, and I'll just show you. I'll take it to this one as well. So I've got some black fluid. Let me put a little bit out here. This is cobalt black fluid acrylic. This is Deco. I'm using a lot of Deco Art products today. Just kind of happened that way. They're some of my favorites. But I kind of splattered and then kind of just took my brush and laid it on here, because a lot of times, and then came back and just kind of dabbed it up. Because a lot of times the gold leaf kind of leaves these little black kind of crinkly lines or things, and some inconsistencies, that kind of thing, as you put it down, like those little holes and cracks and different things like that. So that's what I did for this as well. So just so that it's not super pristine and, special and all that, that it kind of looks a little bit like gold leaf. We'll see how it looks once it gets into the piece, but pretty pleased with that. And then I experimented a little bit. This actually is not bad either, and I could really see this working for a lot of different things. This was fingernail polish. Why not? Why not try everything? So this is just Sally Hansen's regular old fingernail polish. And again, this is just copy paper, and I just painted it out. And the finish on it is really smooth and soft. It's really, really pretty. But it's not as gold as I would like, because I know I'm going to be putting layers and different things like that. But I will use this for something else. And you could probably paint it right onto a surface. All of these you could, but I want to use it as a collage. I want to use these as collage elements because I want to be able to really control where I'm putting everything. So I am excited to experiment with this, and I wanted to explain to you what this is and what I did and my random experimenting. Also today, I'll just quickly go over, I'm using some random bits of collage elements, not a lot. I'm going to start on a gessoed surface. I'm using my MDF board, and then I have a color palette that I want to stick to, hopefully. You know how it goes. Sometimes a great idea doesn't always work out. So I've got Payne's Gray, Carbon Black. I got 2 Carbon Blacks out there. Prussian Blue, Teal, Quinacridone Gold, Raw Umber, and Quinacridone Magenta. Those are the colors that I want to be using along with gesso. And then I'm going to make some incredible texture, I hope. I've got out here, and these are all Deco art, with the exception of this one. I've got my crackle, my favorite, love crackle paint, some texture sand, some crackle paste, and then some super heavy gesso. I'm going to mix the texture sand and the super heavy gesso together, and then I'm going to, in different spots, put the crackle paint and the crackle paste. And the reason I'm doing that is because I want to see what it looks like, what the difference is, and that kind of thing. I'll be using some glaze because once I get all this texture down, I'm going to glaze the heck out of it and just go over it with all of my wonderful color palette here and add in the collage and that kind of stuff. That is the plan. Let's see how it goes. All right, my friends, let's get started. All right, so let's begin. I'm gessoing my MDF board and getting a nice good coverage and making sure I have really painterly brush strokes back and forth and not nice and even, because it really adds to the texture of the background. And so now I'm going to begin to add all my yummy good texture. And so I am using, this is the crackle paint, and it's a little bit smoother. And then the crackle paste is thicker. You can see the difference there. Both worked wonderfully. The thicker you apply either of the mediums, the more cracks you get, the bigger cracks, I should say. You get lots of fine little cracks when it's smooth, but the thicker it is, oh, the yummy cracks. But it does take a lot of time to dry, and that's the hardest part for me, is because I want to just continue to move on in the next step. So I've taken the texture sand and some super heavy gesso because I really wanted it to be chunky and thick and really, really grungy. And so I am mixing a little bit of that super heavy gesso with the texture sand, plus it helps the texture sand smooth out a little bit better. There are certain areas that I didn't put the super heavy gesso with it, but then I will come back and mix a little bit in. But I'm just here and there and kind of trying to think about where I want some of that, because that texture sand's going to soak in a lot of that color, and thinking about where I wanted that color to kind of be really, really saturated. And then just keeping in mind where I want my focal point and that kind of thing in the piece. And speaking of focal points, I do have a new workshop out, and you can check that out. I do talk a little bit about it at the end of the video. Now, it's dry. It took 24 hours for it to dry, and I just let it be. And it is wonderful. I just love it. So I'm working with my colors that I talked about at the beginning of the video, and mixing. I've got some glazing medium out now, and I'm pulling my colors out and then mixing my glazing medium into it so I can get the right consistency instead of mixing the glazing medium directly into the paint itself. And I'm putting the background color down first, and that's just a mixture of raw umber, gray, and the caramel color from Lucas Paints. And then I'm doing some reverse stenciling and just picking that glaze and paint up through my stencil. And I do this in a couple of stages. because I really want that pattern in that background for some unexpected effect, and to bring in some white and light that helps bring the piece together and add brightness and color. And so I'll do this a couple of times, playing with the stencils in all of the paint. One, because I love it, and two, because I want that pop of white in those corners and things to really add balance and brightness. And so I'm just doing the dance now, where I'll go back and forth to get the right color, consistency, brush strokes, all of that, until it feels right for me. And I'm working around the edges mainly. I'll do a light coat over all of the yummy goodness, but around the edges where I know that that's where the neutral colors are going to be. And again, I'm working back and forth between gray, raw umber, caramel, and some glazing medium. And then I do add a little bit of titanium white and gesso. The gesso gives it a real chalky feel, and the titanium white will give it a little bit smoother feel. And I work both of those in just a little bit because it adds a diversity of texture. I'm being mindful to use painterly brush strokes, which is kind of like a cross hatching, to give it some movement, to move things around so that it doesn't look precise and pristine, but to keep it really moving so you can see the colors. All of the stencils that I'm using today will be on sale this week, and all of the supplies will be listed on the blog, and the link to the blog is down below in the YouTube description box. And I'm using alcohol on my rag to pick up some of that paint. Back and forth I will go until it feels right. But you can see where it's really dark, that's the texture sand, and it just soaks in that paint. This is the pattern 5 stencil. I'm using Geo Duo stencil and Old World Duo stencil, or Old World Mini stencil. And again, just picking up to add some interest in that background, very subtly. So I mixed two colors here, Payne's Gray and Prussian Blue. And those are, they're just some of my favorite colors. Payne's Gray is really gray, but it has a blue tint to it. And Prussian Blue is deep, deep, rich blue. And oh my goodness. And I'm using a wet paintbrush so that it moves around the piece a little bit. And then I'll add in a little bit of glazing medium, again, to get some smoothness and to get it down in those cracks. The glazing medium really helps it glide over all of that texture. And look at that texture sand just soaking in that color. Oh, it's so good. All those cracks and everything just come alive with the color. I'm adding a little bit of gesso in with my paint now, just to get some variety. And this is the process, is when you're trying to get different layers, color layers and that kind of thing, is work around your piece, letting the other areas to dry so that you can come back and then add another layer of color, which will add to the richness of what you're doing. Keep in mind too, as you're adding your colors, when you're using a glazing medium or water to kind of tone down your colors or help it go over the surface, the other colors are going to show through underneath. And so if you have opposing colors or two colors, that might make a green, or so keep that in mind as you are layering your colors. I try to keep them very separate, or just overlap just a little bit, unless I like the color that they blend into each other as. So that was quinacridone gold, and that's one of my, these are all my favorite colors, and I just am in heaven. So you can see as I start layering here that I want a darker color for that quinacridone magenta, and it's lighter because I've got glazing medium and I've got some water in there. So I'm going to layer it up, and then I'm going to come back and add another layer so that I can get that rich deep color. And every layer adds a dimension and depth to your work. And so I know that as I'm adding this orange in over that magenta, it will create a beautiful color. And as I add it into that blue, it's going to kind of go brownish greenish. So I keep that in mind as I add my layers. So now that I wanted it to dry so I could add additional color, but as I took a look, I wanted that pattern in the background to really stand out a little bit more than it had. And so I'm using beige and gesso mixture to get the right color that's subtle enough that blends in with the background, but still adds light and brightness and interest. And then I'm going to come back over that again and layer color, because I want those stenciled areas to look like they're all part of the piece and that they're layered in there instead of just stuck on top. So now comes my wonderful fake gold leaf, and I'm so happy with this. So I'm just putting it down with some gel medium instead of fluid matte medium, because there is so much texture on this that it was having a hard time staying down, and I couldn't get a good contact. So I needed something a little bit heavier like the gel medium. And I'm trying to place these down like you would see some gold leaf in like bits and squares and things like that. Trying to leave some gap in between to see some of the color through. And I wanted to bring some of that gold over to the other side to kind of keep the eye moving around the piece. I'm doing the same thing with the gold leaf, is I'm adding color up to the edges and over the edges so that it all feels cohesive and not just like these were stuck on, just kind of overlapping a little bit and then wiping it back. And so I'm just coming back now and darkening up my colors, adding a little bit of raw umber in there to really make those crackles stand out and add some depth. So now I have grabbed some words that go along with the quote and the inspiration for this piece. I hope you stick around for the conversation at the end about that. It's a good one. And I'm just putting that all down with some gel medium again because there's just so much yummy goodness on there. It was having a hard time sticking down. And I added a little bit of gold down here at the bottom because I typically work in threes to, again, keep the eye moving and make the piece interesting. And so I'm going to continue to do the dance a little bit and fuss with it and add some darker parts to the piece to really bring all of the shading and depth and dimension to the piece. I also wanted to add just a tiny bit of gold there, so again that looked like it was all one piece and wasn't just stuck on there at the last minute. And that's about it, my friends. I'm going to shade the edges with my black soft pastel. I hope you enjoyed today's project. If you did, subscribe and like and share and all those wonderful things so that you never miss a video. And stick around for the conversation at the end. It's a good one. And if you get a chance, check out the new workshop. All right, my friends, I will see you next week. Well, hello loves, happy Sunday to you. I could not be happier with how this turned out. You know, you always start a project, or I'll speak for me. I start a project with this idea, and sometimes you just don't know what to expect, or even how it will look. And I had a lot of different things happening that I wanted to put in here, and I positively love this. Oh my goodness. The texture, you'll be able to see it in the pictures. It is phenomenal. That crackle. Oh, so I did an experiment with this, and I used the crackle paint and the crackle paste. And the crackle paint, where it all actually, both of them crackled really well where I put it on really heavily. And that's really what you need to do to get these just yummy, delicious cracks. Oh, happiness, oh, down in my heart. I just love it. The texture sand is fantastic. It adds another texture. It just soaks in that paint, and it's just gritty and grungy, and oh, it just feels good. And then my experiment with the gold paper, fake gold leaf, I love it. We'll be using this all the time now. I crinkled it up, and I went back over it, over the edges, to kind of, you know, push everything back. And I went over all of that in the video, but it just makes me happy. Just so happy. Love how all of the texture, everything, just makes me happy. Okay, I'll stop saying happy. Okay, so in here, and I love, okay, so it might just be me, but this looks like a person. And that, excuse me, that has been happening to me a lot lately, where I'm creating, and all of a sudden you can see kind of a silhouette of a person, and I'm like, what does that mean? So good. I just love it. Love it when that stuff happens. But to me, this looks like a person right here. And I wasn't planning it that way. I was just trying to get, you know, bits and pieces that looked like gold leaf, and just happy. Okay, stop saying happy. This says, I have a couple of quotes in here. Actually, just one quote, and then the paper that I tore has wine less, breathe more, and it went on and on. It was a good little quote that I kind of tore down. But this says, and I chose words from this quote that I'm going to read from in just a second, but it says, power to choose, and then in it lies growth and freedom. Ah, so good. And this to me represents freedom. It's just a little bit of everything. It's free flowing, it's organic. This just represents freedom to me. And so I knew that I was going to be using this quote. That was the inspiration. But the whole quote, and this quote is by Viktor Frankl, who was a Holocaust survivor. So it says, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. Freedom, our growth and our freedom in our response. So I have always said that how we grow and choose to grow, it is practice. It's a daily practice. And this is a prime example of practice, because this is a great little book, and I'll have a link to this in the supplies. It's called The Joy of Now Journal. But over here it says, everyone has habitual responses to certain stimuli. When your partner, friend, boss, or parent presses one of your buttons, you instinctively respond in the same way you always have. And in doing so, you perpetuate the situation from which you wish to escape. So there's that freedom part of that. So with practice, you can change that. You can change it. You can change anything that you are wanting to change within your life, but it takes practice. It's not a one and done. It's an over and over practice. And we get to choose how we respond to people in our lives who push our buttons, and we all know what that is like. And or people who are unkind, or all of those people who hurt us, people who have broken our trust. We all get to choose how we respond. And I'm not saying it's a perfect thing. It's a perfect response every time. And I know for me, as I have walked through broken trust and hurt and abandonment and all of that kind of stuff, my response got better and better and better. As I responded, I began to give myself space before I responded, for one, which helps. And my first response to whatever it might be wasn't great. It was better. And then I realized that. And as soon as we are aware of what we're wanting to change or where we're wanting to grow, and we are in that process of making that happen and doing the practice, we get better and better at it. It's like working out a muscle. It's not strong at first, but the more you lift those weights, the more you do the things, the stronger it becomes. And that is our practice, and how we can choose to show up in the world, even in the presence of yucky hurt and pain and people who are unkind, or who have done things to us, we can choose how we respond. And in that response, we get freedom, because when we hold on to all of that yuck and stuff and unforgiveness and all of those things, it only hurts us. We aren't in control of our surroundings when we respond in the way that we shouldn't. And so I just want to give you a quick reminder that you have the power to choose. And in that choice and in that practice lies your growth and your freedom. You are free from all the things, all the bad stuff. It doesn't mean that we forget. It doesn't mean that we, all of that. It just means that we aren't part of the cycle. We're not perpetuating it. And we're walking away, and we're choosing our response, and we're practicing grace and kindness, and it doesn't even, I don't even think you have to call it grace and kindness. It's just, I choose not to respond. I choose not to engage. I choose not to let you trigger me in that way. I choose not to, whatever it is for you. And then we can go from there. And then it can become grace and kindness, forgiveness, all of those things. So that is my word for you today, loves. I hope you get to play with some paste and some crackle and some goodness. It's so good for the soul. All right, loves. Oh, one more thing. I have a new workshop out. I have, it's called Focal Points and Finishing Touches. There is a video on YouTube. There's also information on my website, and in the workshop area. You can sign up now. It's available to you. Early bird pricing is happening right now, and so you can get it for a good price, and I hope that you take advantage of that. Also, the stencils will be on sale that I used today, and I think that's it. All right, my loves, have a wonderful Sunday and find your freedom today, loves. Find it and then practice it. All right, loves, have a wonderful Sunday, and always know that you are loved.